My father had actually kept me very protected. So all the threats that were coming in Swat, it never got to me while I was there. After we left, like he didn't tell me, my mom told me that, once we found a note that said we will kill your daughter hanging on the gate outside our house. And that's
Oh,
when Abu, like my dad, Abu decided like he's going to like quietly move you out to
oh,
where my
what?
siblings were staying, were like with my auntie. And I was like, what?
And you did not
So
find
these
out
things
after
never
the
got to
fact.
me. No,
So
I
you
didn't
only
because
found out
I was like
after.
so happy.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world.
On today's episode, we have Kanwal Hassan, a Pakistan-born and Hong Kong-based artist and PhD holder who focuses on research work that explores the intersection of gender and leadership. She joins us to talk about her experience living in Hong Kong as an ethnic minority and how she experienced more colorism and discrimination back home in Pakistan. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. As you guys know, where we're based in Hong Kong, it is a diverse city with people from all walks of life. So for this episode, we want to continue highlighting that diverse side of the city, all the stories and experiences that exist in this small city. So this is why for this episode, I'm so glad to have Kanwal joining us, and she will be sharing her experience and stories growing up in Pakistan and also in Hong Kong. So, Kanwal, thank you so much for joining us on Proudly Asian. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing here. I'm doing great. Thank you so much again.
Lovely. I can't wait to hear all about your experiences in the two places where you grew up, where you kind of like started, your new life. Because as I know, you're currently based in Hong Kong, working as a researcher. So I can't wait to find out more about, your work and also your lived experience. But for us to get things started, we normally ask our guests on Proudly Asian a set of questions, just so our listeners can get to know you a little better. So why don't we start with the basics? Tell us about your background. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Okay, who am I? Let's start with the name. My name is Kanwal. That means water lily. My grandfather named me after a very muddy puddle that he saw that had like a little water lily flower growing in the middle of it. And I guess he thought of his new granddaughter and he named me after that. So that's what my name means. Who else am I? I'm a self-taught artist and I'm also a social scientist. My background in academia has always been government and international studies and international relations because I grew up in Pakistan. Um, I was surrounded by a lot of political instability. I guess that kind of factored into why I went into this, because I wanted to understand the broader underlying issues of um, how it comes to this, like how has my country turned into this chaotic place, and where there's such a lack of like social rights for individuals. So I guess that's why I chose that, and that kind of got me to Hong Kong. I came to Hong Kong to pursue my PhD. I was still doing my master's, but I got into a full scholarship here and I stayed back. And what else? I'm also a mom to a little
Wow.
toddler. He just turned 3 this weekend,
Oh.
and we are now planning his birthday party because it was Ramadan during his birthday, and I just couldn't get everything set. So lazy mom.
Oh. Wow, Oh, congratulations
you.
and happy birthday to your toddler. I hope you guys will have a fun time celebrating, eating all the great food. And I mean, as you mentioned before, you moved to Hong Kong about like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like you grew up mostly in Pakistan. I'm just like curious about, like what it was like for you. I also know that you grew up in a very specific town. So I'm just wondering, like, what's the culture like, the day to day, your childhood experience?
So I was born in a small city of KPK, that is like a province. And because of my religious minority status, there were a lot of challenges. So there's two types of Muslim, two sects basically. One is the Sunni Muslims and one is the Shiite Muslims. The Shiite Muslims are in a minority. So if you say there's 100% of Muslims in the world, a very small minority would be like 15 to 20% would be the Shiites. These are like rough numbers I'm giving you. And so I belong to the Shiite minority group. And because of that, I was always kind of scared to share my identity with friends. So even in the city where I was born and my entire family around me and everything, I was still afraid to tell my classmates that I'm a Shia Muslim because they would associate a lot of things. They would be like, oh, don't be friends with her. She has a different set of beliefs from us. And I remember this one particular incident, and this was like when I was 13 years old. My best friend in like grade 6 or 7 was like, I'm still friends with her despite the fact that she's Shia. What? Are you doing me a favor? And other than that, my family life was very happy. I grew up in a joint family system. It was just a very happy childhood that I had. But there were little incidents where I was reminded in school that, it's not okay to be who I am. I'll be judged for sharing who I am. And yeah, about the particular city that you're talking about, I'll name it. It's called Swat. It's a Pashtun majority place, and I'm not a Pashtun. So I didn't speak the local language, which is Pashto. Again, the minority experience of not fitting in. So coming to Hong Kong was like really easy. I was like, oh, I don't speak the language. Fine, no problem. I've done it before. I'll do it again. So yeah, I've grown up in a lot of different cities across Pakistan. In smaller cities, it was difficult. In bigger cities, it was a lot easier. And not all Shiite Muslims have had the same experiences as me. So when I came to Hong Kong, or even when I went to college, I would tell them like, hey, this is who I am. And they were cool. I wasn't being judged anymore. And I had friends from all different kinds of like backgrounds in my college. And I was like, hey, this is fun. So when I talked to Shiite Muslims in Hong Kong, like, you've had a very difficult childhood because of this. And we were living in a completely different environment. So it wasn't like that for them. That's when I realized like smaller cities, living in a smaller city that is not so diverse can really, really take a toll on your friends and taking really toll on your mental health in that way, like not fitting in. And
like when you don't really talk about it or when you don't tell people, people would never, imagine like you having gone through this kind of childhood, as in like you were basically a minority in your own country.
oh, yeah.
And I feel like when you move to Hong Kong, like, oh, if you like tell people, oh, you're from Pakistan, they just all thought like all Pakistanis were the same, but it's definitely not the
Yeah,
case. And
very true.
yeah.
Yeah, all Pakistanis are not the same.
No Asian is the same. So it's like, this is definitely like a misconception. And I'm so glad that you like sort of like started your new life in Hong Kong. You're finding it a lot more like enjoyable and definitely like safer, to be around people, to tell people about your experience and who you are. And I just want to like dig a little deeper into the implication of being a religious minority in Pakistan. I mean, you did sort of like explain a little bit of like context around like, oh, there are minorities even within the whole Muslim religion. And I just want to like kind of understand a little bit more about that, like dynamics, because I mean, when I was talking to a friend that I know who's from Pakistan, and she mentioned that people who are religious minorities in Pakistan could be subjected to, even like physical violence. So I just want to like understand a little bit more about that dynamics.
Absolutely. So my family was directly targeted multiple times. Like growing up, the main reason why we had to leave our hometown was because a man walked into my father's office and handed him a threat note in his hand saying that if you don't keep paying us monthly, we're going to children or we're going to murder you in your office. So very heavy things for like a 9-year-old to learn that we're going to be leaving our city because someone's threatening to kill my father. My father has always been very headstrong about keeping us safe and just, providing for us and supporting us in our education and everything. He never shied away from moving from city to city to city over and over again, uprooting his business, his life, to keep us safe and to ensure that we always got the best education. So that is one aspect of it. We had to move a lot to keep ourselves safe and alive. And other than that, so this is more of a challenge and a problem in smaller cities, I would say. But over the years, like, through like what happened after 9/11, there was a lot of violence in Pakistan and there was a lot of extremism, which kind of led to feed this kind of sectarial violence and this sectarial, like, Sunni Shiite violence was kind of amplified after that. So it all started in the 90s and 2000s and target killings, kidnappings. Two of my uncles were kidnapped for ransom only because they were easy targets to pick because our names are different. They're like, they would have certain aspects of our name to kind of recognize who is Shiite and who is not. And they were picked up by these people that nobody knows of, and we had to pay a ransom to get them back home safe and alive. So when things like these happen in your family, you kind of become really resilient to things, and you're very grateful for safety. So one of the things I absolutely love about Hong Kong is the safety aspect of it. It's one of the most safest places that I've traveled and I've been to. So yeah.
I just can't imagine what it was like growing up as a child, like you weren't really having like a normal childhood, but then like basically at any given point, like you and your family would have to be ready to run for your life. And like there were actual physical violence, either being threatened or like happening like to people, and I just can't imagine that kind of stress that you grew up with. But I mean, on the bright side, of course, as you mentioned, it made you, like more grateful for safety as you continue to like find a place and build a home in a city that you feel safe in. And also it makes you more resilient. And the other aspect to the life you had in Pakistan, I also understand that, within the country, there are also different layers of maybe like discrimination and colorism, right? Can you tell us more about it?
Oh, yes. Hell yes, I can. Because I went to school. So I went to school in Swat. That's where Malala Yousafzai is from too. So I lived in Swat from 2003 or 2002 to 2006, and that's when we moved. We had to move again because there was another military operation that kind of happened in 2009, and we moved right before that happened. So in Swat, a lot of people are light-skinned, very light-skinned, and I'm not Pashtun, so I was considered dark, and they had a nickname for me called, in Pashto they call like Tor, that means black. So they would call, and there's another funny aspect to this. Well, not funny, but like other than being their colorism, there's also, so every province in Pakistan has like a separate culture and a separate language that is specific to that province. And if you don't speak that dialect or that language, you're still considered an outsider. So being a non-Pashtun in a Pashtun-dominant area was seen as the outsider girl who is dark-skinned and who doesn't speak the language. So I was kind of like, stay away from her. She's a bad influence because she came from a big city to a small city. And she doesn't cover her head. She doesn't cover her body in the burqa, so she's going to be a bad influence for our daughters. So I wasn't invited to birthday parties. I wasn't invited to. I had like 2 other girls in my classroom. Imagine that, in a class of like 35 children. So 2 more girls, and I wasn't invited to the party.
No.
Anyway, it didn't really get to me anymore. I have a younger brother. So it's 4 of us. At the time, my younger brother was the only one who was living there, because my other 2 older siblings had to live in the bigger city where they could do O and A levels. That was not available in Swat. So my younger brother and I were like a teen. We would explore new areas of. It's a beautiful city, by the way. It's one of the most beautiful cities in Pakistan. It is supposedly called the Switzerland of Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
It's absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Wow.
But the people, the people are interesting. I wouldn't say all of them were bad, but you know how kids are in school. It's just so much going on. Everyone wants to find who they are, and it's just
and they
funny
particularly
times. Kids can be mean.
They particularly like to pick on the ones who like don't look like them or who aren't like them, right? Because like they are the easy targets. But I mean, I'm just curious, like you know, in the schools that you went to, in the town that you grew up in, were you normally the only one, or like were there other kids who also kind of like shared similar backgrounds as you?
Particularly for Swat, it was just me. I was a non-Pashtun speaker girl in my class. All of them were Pashtuns. And even my classmates who had lived outside of Swat, who were like living in the UK or Ireland or here, then they were coming back. They were still Pashtun. So I was the only non-Pashtun speaking non-Pashtun that was in the class. My father had actually kept me very protected. So all the threats that were coming in Swat, it never got to me while I was there. After we left, like he didn't tell me, my mom told me that, you know, once we found a note that said, "We will kill your daughter," hanging on the gate outside our house. And that's when Abu, like my dad, Abu decided like he's going to like quietly move you out to where my siblings were staying, like with my auntie. And I was like, what?
And you did not find out
these things
after
never
the
got
fact.
to me. No,
So
I didn't.
you only
because
found out
I was like
after.
so happy. I was like, so I'm going to Islamabad? Wow, that'd be so much fun. Why are you sending me to Swat? He's like, you know what? Go there, check out the schools. We'll move you there soon. So just go for the summer. And then I never went back. And then we moved to another city. So after we left, and like many years later, me
Oh my God.
leaving, it's like I found out like, oh, that's why I went to Swat and to Islamabad in that summer. Interesting.
It was because your family got a death threat and you did not find out until like years later.
I didn't know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Wow. I mean, thank you so much for, you know, like being open to sharing this part of your story, because like I understand
I really
that.
appreciate you inviting me over to share this, because I've shared my story with people that I meet in person, and then one person was like, you should give a TED talk. I was like, no, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe not. Anyway, we'll think about that next.
You should. Consider this your starting point, maybe. Like sharing your story to more people, because I understand that it's no joke. Like I mean, if people had family members in Pakistan still, and if the fact that they share about this type of experience elsewhere, like it could have implications on their own like family members. So I really am grateful that you are open to sharing, you know, this side of your story with our listeners, you know, with everyone, just so like we are more culturally aware, you know, about, you know, there being different experiences for different people, even though they come from the same country. So I'm very grateful for that, that you're open to speaking.
Yeah, I really appreciate inviting me on and encouraging me to be open about my story. The one thing I want people to take away from this is that people come to Hong Kong from very different backgrounds. They are not always like the privileged class or people who are like expats who grew up outside of Hong Kong and then weren't born and raised here, we have very different stories to tell. So my story is just one story. And not everyone in Pakistan from a minority has had an experience like me. So I don't want people to generalize my experience into thinking that, oh, Pakistan is unsafe for everyone. I still go back. I still go travel around the city, travel around the country, and I don't feel threatened at all. So it's just in the areas where I was living at the time where my family was highlighted. One, because my father was one of the few medical doctors who was practicing his practice at the time in the very small city that I mentioned, the first one where I was born and raised. I'm not naming any names.
That's good to hear. Like, I hope like now that times are different, like even, like people everywhere are also like moving on for the better. They might be a little bit more aware, more educated. But now I want to talk a little bit about, your experience, building a new life in Hong Kong, because like, as mentioned slightly earlier, you moved to Hong Kong about 10 years ago. I'm just wondering like what prompted the move and like why Hong Kong specifically for you?
So my father-in-law was actually based in Hong Kong, Pakistan consulate. And he was based here. He had been here for like 3 years at that time. And my husband was looking for a master's program. I was still in my master's program and in Pakistan. And my husband got his admission here and I accompanied him. And then I applied for my PhD. So he started his master's program, and by the time he was done, I was done with my master's thesis and I started my PhD. So that's what initiated the whole move. Like we had somebody here who knew the place, who could help guide us in like getting started, renting out a place and everything like that. So it wasn't completely out of the blue. Let's go to Hong Kong. We had something in place that that really worked out for us.
That's good. That's good. And I mean, I'm just wondering, like, before you moved to Hong Kong, like, did you hear much about the city, and what kind of impression did you have? And on arrival, did everything turn out to be, as expected for you?
This might sound silly. My only like introduction to Hong Kong was through this YouTuber called Bub's Beauty. I used to watch her channel.
Wow. Yeah, I did watch Bob's videos as well.
Back in the day.
Yeah, the OG
really
Asian
cool.
YouTuber.
Yeah. So I used to watch her videos, and when my husband had told me like, hey, we might move to Hong Kong. I'm looking into master's program there. And I was like, hey, Hong Kong. Oh wait, Bub's Beauty. She showed a lot of different small markets and the Disneyland and everything. And I was like, oh, it looked like a cool place. But that was my impression of Hong Kong, whatever I had seen through her, yeah. And then when I came here, it was such a positive change. So, and again, like I'd like to say, now that it's been like a decade for me in Hong Kong, I know that even the South Asian community in Hong Kong there's a lot of disparity, and that disparity is like socioeconomic statuses. People live in different sides of the city, and depending on what side of the city you live in, what kind of a lifestyle you have, that's the kind of circle you have. So my circle has been mostly like expat class who works in the banking sector, and they are all like comfortable. There are no such racism challenges at work because they all work in banks where they are not the only non-Chinese people. That's why I was really protected in that sense again, because my initial start was at the university and I was not the only non-Chinese PhD candidate in my office. So there was a lot of international students. And that's why I say I haven't faced much racism in Hong Kong. And I've literally, like, I've lived in my time. I'm not boasting. I'm just saying that that's been my experience. That's why I never really shied away from telling people who I am, where I'm from, because I was never judged based off of that.
I
And
see.
so Hong Kong was a very, very positive change for me moving out, I wouldn't say assimilating, making friends.
I'm glad like things are definitely working out for you, and it's such a like welcome change to your life, moving to Hong Kong. But I mean, of course, I'm sure you must be also aware about maybe perhaps the discrimination and racism that goes on against the South and Southeast Asian community in the city. I'm just wondering, like being aware of that still being very much a part of the city, or like that still being the experience for some of the South Asian communities here. Like, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel terrible that I've been living in such a bubble that I didn't know about these things that were happening left, right, and center in different circles. So I decided to make a change. And a few months ago, I started reaching out to different NGOs who work in this space, who work with ethnically diverse youth. And I'm currently volunteering at the Zubin Foundation and also FSI. And I just feel like I was living under such a rock in Hong Kong. There's such talented people from not only just the South Asian community, but like the youth groups. And because my work, in my research work was mostly like youth focused, I that and I wanted to do something with my knowledge and my skills and experience. And I was like, I'm just gonna get into people's DMs and start getting involved in what's happening around.
So it's amazing that you have been getting more involved in the NGO work and, like helping empowering or like sharing your experiences with the youths, the South Asian youths in the city. So yeah, that's amazing to hear. But I'm also wondering, like, for yourself or like even for people that you know of, are there still any like sort of like culture shocks in Hong Kong? Because I understand that, every year around March time, it's Ramadan. So that's when the Muslim community everywhere will be doing their fasting, during the holy month. But of course, I understand, like sometimes if I have coworkers who are observing this practice, I myself will be extra mindful of that, like when it comes to like work arrangements and, telling people, okay, maybe it's not great to invite, colleagues who are currently fasting into a room where everyone's eating or like where it smells like food. But I'm just wondering, like, since this practice is still pretty much observed by sort of like the minority group in Hong Kong, I'm just wondering for yourself, like, have you had any experiences? Maybe it's like a little difficult to explain to your local colleagues or like friends about that.
Yeah, at first they were like, you can't eat or drink something for the whole day? How do you do that?
I know. People are
And
asking, like,
there's
what about
definitely challenges.
water?
Yeah, can you drink something? Oh, you can't even drink juice, no tea. How about water? Can you drink water? No, you can't drink anything. But
No.
yeah, it's interesting when you grow up, when you live in a non-Muslim country, you kind of have to explain everything. There was this one funny incident where I was trying to explain what is halal. So it is slaughtered, halal meat is like beef or chicken or goat meat that is slaughtered in a specific Islamic way. And I had to I couldn't explain it to my Chinese friend, and she was like, so what do you mean? We're like, oh, you have to say a special prayer before you slaughter the animal. Like, oh, you have to pray to the animal first? No, you don't have to pray to the animal first. You just have to say a prayer. So it turned into like a joke. But Ramadan, yes, it is challenging. I'm not currently working at the moment. But when I was, it used to be. And for my husband, for example, like when it's Eid, that's the big day, and he was at work because it's not a public holiday. And usually when you're in a Muslim country, they do cut back on working hours. So let's say instead of letting people go around 6 or 7. They would be home around 3:30, 4:30, just so that they can break the fast at 7 p.m. With their family. And it's difficult to navigate that when like everyone else is going about their normal routines and their day, and you have to kind of work around it. So
That
it's
is so
difficult for
true.
people who are working, for sure.
I think maybe one thing that's great that came out of like COVID was that people are a little bit more like used to that whole flexible work arrangement. So like for ethnic minorities, you know, like workers who work in the office in Hong Kong currently, there might be more of a chance for like more flexible arrangement, because I can definitely tell like if you have to work from the office every day and then during lunch break, it must be so painful, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
or like you have to
yeah.
like maybe lock yourself in a room where it doesn't smell like food, or like you have to take a walk so like you don't see people eating.
So here's the thing. So I haven't fasted for the last 3 years because I couldn't. For the first one, I was pregnant. For the next two, I was breastfeeding my toddler. So this was my first Ramadan where I actually fasted all the way through.
Wow.
So after the first week, your body kind of shifts. If you've ever done intermittent fasting, for anyone listening who's done intermittent fasting, they would know your body kind of um, adjusts to it. And like even after Ramadan, I realized I don't get as hungry as I used to prior to that. And I'm so used to eating less now that I've just continued on. It's not that I don't eat for the entirety of the day, but I'm very mindful of when I'm eating and how I'm eating now.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, you know, like speaking from your experience, would you have any advice for people who might be around or who are working in the same office as like colleagues who observe this fasting practice? Like, how can they be more
Don't
like
offer
maybe
food.
respectful and
Don't
mindful?
offer food. Don't drink your coffee at the usual time. It smells really good. You can't drink it.
Yeah.
And don't pass around treats saying, hey, you can eat this in the evening. So yeah, just little things like that. I know it comes from a good place, but just don't do it. Don't
I
offer
like,
food.
yeah, like don't eat McDonald's or like anything that smells so damn good.
Yeah. And another funny thing, well, McDonald's is not halal in Hong Kong, so the only thing that we can eat
Oh.
at McDonald's is the fish burger. And well, recently I found out that even the French fries that they have like some sort of like like a beef salt formula. So someone ruined it for me recently. Now that I know, I can't eat it.
Oh no.
Any Muslim listening to this podcast is probably like cursing me in their head.
It's like, oh, why? Why
Why did
did
you
you
have to
have?
ruin McDonald's fries for me?
I know. Oh
So yeah,
no.
halal food is one thing
Wow.
that could get better in Hong Kong. That is something I truly, truly miss about my home country is like good food.
I feel like I need to make a reel out of this and then tag McDonald's Hong Kong and let them know. Maybe they should
Please,
come out with
please.
some like halal friendly French fries or food options, because who can resist
Absolutely.
McDonald's fries, right?
Was eating them. I would eat like at least once or twice a week with my toddler, and we love them. We love your fries. McDonald's, if you're listening, please, the fries.
I gotcha. We're gonna tag McDonald's and, start something. But now I also want to understand a little bit more about, the work. As you mentioned, you did like your PhD work with a focus on, gender stereotypes and also silent sexism that young girls experience. Like, can you tell us more about, the research that you did, anything that you would like the world to know about from the work that you do?
Sure. So for my PhD work, I looked at how foreign policy is made, but the work that I did afterward was more of like policy, education policy, and I transitioned out of the government and international studies. So my research work was more so about leadership in younger people, not leadership or politics. So I worked at the Education University of Hong Kong for two projects. One of the projects explored how young people across different cultures view leadership, whether they have a hierarchical leadership or whether they are more prone to adopting like a collaborative systemic view of leadership. And one of the major findings was, now this study had more than like 60,000 quantitative responses. And we did a lot of, like we did at least 100 reviews across 11 countries. And what we gathered from that was younger people between the ages of 14 to 18 tend to admire leaders who are more collaborative, who don't have a boss mentality and have a leader mentality. So that is something that was very fascinating for me. Like, look at these teenagers who know the difference between a boss and a leader. And that was just really, really interesting. And based off of the data that we collected from that major study, I wrote a paper specifically about how young girls face different challenges, or what kind of stereotypes are they exposed to going to these international schools in a very diverse, well-resourced environment and still facing these stereotypes and challenges. So that's what I kind of focused on, and I found that younger girls were reporting like how they would see their female teachers and male teachers putting in the same effort, putting in work. And even then, the male teacher would get promoted and the female teacher wouldn't get promoted, even though that she was putting in extra hours. She was more involved with the students, and that kind of, it was heartbreaking, but it was also nice to see that there was this kind of awareness in younger girls that, okay, this exists, and there is a lot of stereotypes that seep through the protective walls of the schools. So that was something that came out of that. And it was nice to see that also the male students around the same age range were talking about providing resources and building bridges between different generations who might not have such progressive views about female leadership. So that kind of gives you hope about the future. Like, this next upcoming generation is much more aware of what needs to be done. They're ready to be allies, and they're ready to help facilitate the positive change that we all want to see.
Wow, that's so encouraging to hear. I mean, I think definitely, I mean, this is such a systemic problem. So, like, there isn't just like one solution for all of it, but that it's always like encouraging to hear that, even for younger boys, they are becoming a little bit more aware about all the stereotypes and sexism that exist in the world. And in fact, like, a lot of like people might think, sexism or like gender equity is only strictly like a girl's problem, but then it takes, both genders to, solve this problem in the future. And so that's definitely great to hear, those are the findings from your research. But I'm also wondering, like, based on your research, like, do you have any like points of view to share with us, like any takes on, how we can sort of like, address this systemic discrimination, racism or sexism in Asia that are taking place? I know it's a big question, but like, if you have any points of view, any insights that you can share with us, like, we would like to hear that.
I do. So I'll really narrow it down to one thing that I really believe in. So we know we have to fight racism, we have to fight stereotypes, we have to fight a generation that thinks entirely differently from how we do. And I think is to lead with empathy and kindness. We cannot change the way people think by fighting with them or arguing with them or just like, with clashes. A lot of this happens within my own culture. There's this term called desi auntie. That means like an older woman who has all these stereotypes of gender roles and all these like negative things. And the way I think about it, the only way that you can change even women or they see uncles who are judgmental, who think like talk negative or passing like a negative comment or, just regular things that going off on a tangent here. So yeah, instead of associating a negative connotation to that desi auntie, desi uncle culture, let's think about the environment that they grew up in. Let's think about what environment, what times, what were the norms, the cultures in their times. And let's go from that. Instead of just going to like bash them, cutting them out of your life, not talking to them, and just completely ignoring them, that's not going to change anything. Yeah, you can cut people out of your life, but are you going to cut your entire family out of your life just because you have a difference of opinion? So leading with empathy and kindness, like, okay, this person passed me a negative comment based on off of what they knew, but here's how I can maybe educate them a little bit, maybe change their mind. If I lead with kindness, perhaps I can shift the way that they think of me, and maybe that will help bring about the positive change that I want to see. So tying all of this into racism and sexism and stereotypes and all of these things, we all have an individual responsibility, and we can only make the change with our actions. So that's how I think about it in my personal capacity.
That's beautiful. And I love how, like leading everything, all the change with empathy, because like sometimes it only, like sometimes people might make some remarks, or like they might make assumptions where you're like, how dare you? But then at the same time, we also need to understand that maybe for the older generations, or like people from generations who aren't, from our generations, that's all they knew, right? Like maybe sometimes it just takes a conversation about, just simply asking, oh, you think that? Like, why do you think so? And you might actually realize that, oh, growing up, they never had that understanding. They never had that, like, education that would equip them to be a little bit more inclusive in their language. So in a way, that's also like equity in practice, which is recognizing everyone came from a completely different starting point, and we are not judging people for, coming from an age where, all these like cancel culture and like this DE&I awareness did not exist for them.
Yeah, it's very true. And like just to give you like a little example from my personal life, my father, he grew up in, again, a very small city. My father's a medical doctor. And he wanted me and my sister to get the same education that my brother was getting. So he was sending all of us to private schools, even when he couldn't afford it. Because like I said, we were moving city to city to city. He had to give up his practice, and he had to pick up different businesses that he knew nothing about. So he made sure that my sisters and my brothers were getting the same education. He was putting in the same effort for all of us. There were voices from within the family, from outside of the family, like, why are you spending so much money on your daughters when you could simply send them to the government school, which was much cheaper and no good, to be honest. And he said, you know what, I want to give them an equal chance at everything. Now, my father didn't know what feminism was, what women empowerment was, what gender equality was, but he was still adamant. It's like basic human nature. He wanted to give all of us an equal chance at succeeding, which he did. So people are doing positive things in their own capacity, in different cultures, different ways that they can. And they don't usually know the names for it. Like you said, like they didn't grow up around like DEI policies and things like that.
Exactly.
Doing the things in action, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Wow. Kudos to your dad for, like being so determined about like giving all of his children, you know, the equal opportunity to advance, you know, in life. So that's amazing. But now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Fires. And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some points in life. So, Kanwal, are you ready for all the questions that are coming your way?
Bring it on.
All right, let's get started. The first question. But you have a PhD. Why aren't you teaching at a university?
If you're at university, call me. I'll teach for you.
Okay, anyone who needs a PhD at a university, make sure to connect with Kanwal. And next question. So you make digital art, but can you also make real art?
Not that I have to prove anything to anybody, but I made this. Yes, I can.
Ooh.
And digital art is real art. Repeat after me.
Yes!
Digital art is real art.
Digital art is real art. Everybody, preach it.
But I can make both.
Yeah, and the third question. Why did you study so much?
Because I love learning. I love teaching myself new things. I don't know what I would do if I can't learn things. I just absolutely love learning. And that's the most you can learn. And I think I was trying to prove a point to all the people leaving notes outside my father's gate, like, take her out of school or we'll kill her. And I was like, you know what? I'll show you.
Yeah.
I'll study as much as I can. So, bye.
Wow. And I can imagine people who ask you why you studied so much must be coming from a place where you're like, oh, you're a girl. You don't need to study this much, right?
Yeah. And it's also like, why did you study so much? And then why are you working right now? Why aren't you doing what I want you to do? Like, you should be doing this after getting a PhD. People, PhDs can also be creative people. Hi, nerdy artists, representation. Yes. So, because studying and researching in sciences, even social sciences, are like very structured. So, our brains and our, like, if you have a creative, you want to balance that out with something that gives you more freedom. My research work, I love learning about new topics and, writing and exploring. But that could get very repetitive and that could get very focused and structured. And I was looking for a break from that. And art gives me that freedom to express a person. I'm incredibly indecisive and art allows for it. So yippee.
That's right. You got to switch gears with your brain from time to time when you are a PhD. Yeah. And finally, in this rapid bias segment, so you are from Pakistan. Where did you learn English?
There's a secret place all across Pakistan. It's called school. We teach English there.
Exactly.
In school, I learned English in school. But I will add to that. So when I was around 8 or 9 years old, from the US, moved back to Pakistan. And we all lived in a joint family system. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, but maybe you can give some context to our listeners.
Sure. So we lived in a very big house into smaller portions that were divided by backyards and lawns, so that everyone had their own space, but then there was a big wall around the house, so I could play with my cousins. That's why I had such a happy childhood. All of my best friend cousins, we were essentially living in one house. So I grew up in that system, which is, I would say, was amazing. And because we were living together, I picked up an American accent. That's how I learned English, and that's why I speak this way. So when I went to college, everybody would say, oh, that's the girl with the fake accent. How is it
What?
fake? If that's how, yeah. So in my college, when I was giving my first presentation, I had never spoken in front of a crowd. And somebody, right before I went in, somebody made a comment about my accent, like how I fake it and how I want to be American, and no. And that shattered my confidence to such a point where I was shaking with the paper in my hand, and I couldn't speak.
No.
I just couldn't speak. I couldn't. And right after that whole 3-minute nightmare was over and the class was over, she was like, hey, I was expecting so much better from you. I thought you liked this topic and you picked this topic. Why couldn't you talk? Like, oh my God, you did that to me. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, that's where I learned English. And
Yeah, wow, that's crazy. So it's just like people were all having like that bias about you. It's like, oh, where's your Pakistani accent?
yeah, why do you want to talk like an American? Why do you carry a fake accent? Why do you fake an accent? And then all throughout my schooling in Pakistan, I had to explain to people, like, I grew up with my cousins in the same house.
Yeah.
I learned my very first English words from them. I spoke with them. We've lived together for years. This is how I learned it. So I can't change it. I can force the Pakistani accent if you want me to, but I don't want to please you. Go away.
That would be the fake accent.
That would be the fake accent.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much misconception around like how accent is formed, because a lot of people would tend to think like, oh, your accent is decided by like where you're from, like who your parents are. But to be honest, I'm not a linguist, but then there are so many factors that go into how an accent is formed. Like it could even be about like the school that the person went to, the people that they used to hang out with. And also an accent could potentially be sort of like a summary of the places that the person have lived. So it's just like honestly, I just it's crazy to kind of like think that people were expecting a certain accent from you, like based on like where you're from. But
sorry to let you guys down.
I mean, but
Accents
that's it.
too.
Yeah, it could
Accents
definitely
also change. If you move to a different place and you're talking to different people, then yeah, you will pick up on it and things will change.
For sure. But that's it for this rapid bias segment. Now, for us to conclude the episode, Kanwal, I'm just wondering, like, because you are also a digital artist yourself, like for people who would like to check out your work or like follow along on your journey, like where can they find you?
I mostly share my work on Instagram. After years and years of stalling and fighting, what do you call it? Imposter syndrome. That's like my best friend. How can I forget it? I finally started my art account and I post most of my work on there, and I'm working on a personal project inspired by all of the teenagers that I work with. And I'm starting my own line of planners and journals where I can incorporate my art and help non-starters such as myself to encourage them to take action. So yeah, and I'll be sharing the whole process and journey on Instagram. Uncharted territory for me, but this year's all about action, so that's what I'm doing.
Yes, I'm so excited for you.
I feel the power through the screen.
Yes. I can't wait to see what will be released, from your Instagram journey, and definitely I would like to, follow along on that journey and see like what's up for you in the coming months. So stay tuned, everyone. We will definitely link Kanwal's Instagram page in the episode description as well. So yeah, follow her on Instagram. And finally, for us to leave this episode, Kanwal, I just have one last question for you. I mean, to you personally, what does it mean to be proudly Pakistani?
I think it means taking the good things of your culture with you wherever you go. I specifically chose this outfit for today. These earrings are from Pakistan. These clothes are from Pakistan. I proudly
beautiful.
wear shalwar kameez all around the city. I have never, I've seen people looking at me, but I just think to myself, they're probably admiring the outfit because it's so hot outside, and this like thin cotton cloth is all you need on your body.
Yeah.
So I wear my culture everywhere I go. I keep my culture close to me by cooking the food. I want to introduce it to my toddler. They love the food too. So these are the good parts of my culture. So I want to share them with anybody and everybody. I invite people to my house. I cook for them. If anybody's curious to try home cooked Pakistani food, I've had a few people over, and like just new friends. I'll be like, you want to taste Pakistani food? Come on over. I'll cook for you. And I hope they can vouch for that in the comments.
That's amazing.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
it
mean,
means to me.
sometimes it's all
Celebrating
about,
good parts.
yes, like showing, sharing the good parts about the culture, you know, proudly wearing it because it's beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us for this episode, Kanwal. And it's so lovely to have you. It was such a fun chat.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.